Only poor people think the system is rigged.
Ooh, we usually save that for last.
Yeah, we're going hot.
Yeah.
Only poor people think the system is rigged?
Yeah. So let me start by framing up what I mean by poor. So in the book, we make a big distinction between being broke, which means you have no money, and being poor, which is a mindset. And it's a dangerous mindset that'll keep you broke forever. And so as I insult poor people in this book, just understand we're talking about a mindset. And also, I feel okay doing it. I grew up poor. I grew up broke and poor, so I did have a poor mindset. And so one of the problems with the concept that you believe the system is rigged is that it keeps you stuck. Because then if it's rigged against you and your people, why bother trying? So it's a very disempowering approach. And it's actually what I grew up in. I grew up in a family, multi-generational poor people, and we just believed that there were people at the top, rich people pulling the strings, not letting us get ahead. And so some branches of my family in the U.S. since the Mayflower, and both my sets of grandparents living in trailer parks. And so as a kid, I'm thinking, obviously the system's rigged. Obviously it is. Hardworking, God-fearing, loving family. Why aren't we getting ahead? And the shift, the reframe that I think is really, really powerful is to look at it like it's a game. So it feels like it's rigged if you don't know how to play the game. And so in the book, we use the metaphor of you show up to a football game in your pickleball gear, right? You got your little paddle, your little shorty shorts, and you're just getting wiped out, right? Because you can't catch the ball with your paddle. Somebody just knocks you down. You feel like the system's rigged. People are blowing the whistle. You're getting fouls all the time. You feel like you're out of your element. You feel like everyone's set up against you. That's not really the case. So the way to look at it, it's a game. And there's a poor people game, a middle class game, a rich person game. And if you want to thrive or survive at a different socioeconomic level, you got to learn how to play the game.
Do you have to go to college to learn the game?
You don't. We actually tackle that topic in the book because anything we see on social media, there's lots of memes out there. And as a researcher, I'm always going and looking at it. Like there's a few. So one of them, we have a chapter that says, buy a house, go to college, get married. And these are basically stats. And there's a whole dark hole in the web. I'm not sure if you've ever fallen into it, where it's this sort of toxic male thing where it's like, don't get married. Women are evil. They're going to take all your money.
No,
okay. Oh, you haven't been down that hole?
No.
Yeah, you're probably.
Have you been down that hole?
Even if I saw that hole, I wouldn't enter it.
Yeah, I haven't discovered that.
Well, I just get sort of fascinated with that because I'm like, oh, is that correct? And so then I go do all the lit review and figure out if that's true. Actually, turns out that significantly higher net worth if you get married. For men and women, by the way. So it's like 3x the net worth for men who are married at the same age as single, and 7x for women.
What's the reason behind that? Is it because a big percentage of it is dual income? Is it when you have more responsibility, you're more driven to earn?
I think both of those are probably factors. And then if you get real, you got somebody in your life saying, "What are you doing, dude? Like, where's that money going?"
Yeah.
And most of us aren't paying attention, right? So most of the money just kind of goes. And when you're in a relationship with someone who sees what's happening, I think it's partially that. Like, I know I grew up a lot when I had the idea I'm going to have kids. It's like, oh, man, this is for real. So I really got to get on top of this. And you also have somebody who's monitoring what's happening. And then in my studies, too, I've found that married people tend to have healthier beliefs around money, too. So there's a belief pattern associated with ultra-wealthy people that I've studied over 100,000 people related to it. And there's something about having somebody in your life close to your mindset. Why are you thinking this way? I mean, it's sort of a mirror to yourself. And sometimes you even hear yourself talk. And that can be really powerful. You hear yourself say something about money and you're like, oh my God, that's twisted. Or oh my God, that's what my parents said. I don't really believe that. And so I think that's one of the benefits of having a really close, intimate relationship with someone that you're committed to is you grow together.
So if you're like in your situation, generational, I guess, what would you call it? Being poor?
Yeah,
not having
sure.
much, right?
Poor people know they're poor.
Okay, so if you come from maybe this is the better way to say it. If you have like a generational outlook on money that is you will never have it, don't know how to manage it, it's poor mindset.
Yes.
Which you went through.
Yep.
How do you even begin to break out of that? Especially when it's generational, right?
Yeah. So there's a concept in psychology here that is really important to understand, and it's something called learned helplessness. And so they did studies with dogs. And if you're a dog lover, this is going to be a little bit rough because it's essentially they torture dogs to learn this. But this is what they did. They put a dog in a cage and they shut the cage and they electrified the bottom of the cage. Now you can probably imagine what the dog did. It went nuts in the cage, jumped around, trying to find any means of escape. Eventually, the dog learned escape is impossible, and it just lays down and it whimpers. And it's just like, nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to have to take it, okay? Now, they did another study. So these dogs are essentially traumatized. They did another study where they changed the cage. So this time, half the cage was electrified. There was a little barrier. If the dog jumped over to the other side of the cage, no electric shock. So safety, just a jump away. And as I'm talking about this, Mikey, I know you know people like this. I know you know people. So from the researcher's perspective, all you got to do is jump over there. You get everything you want. You're safe. For us, that could be you get wealth. You get whatever it is you want in life. They took brand new dogs who hadn't been traumatized. The dog gets electrified, jumps around, over to the other side, safe. They took the dogs who had been in that first condition where escape was impossible. Those dogs just laid down and whimpered. They didn't even, it almost makes me want to choke up, Mikey, because I know people like this. You know people like this, people we love. Escape, success is right over there. And we're experienced enough to know all you got to do is just do this. Just do these 3 things, dude. And there it is. But they have that learned helplessness, which they learned in childhood. And that learned helplessness says, escape is impossible. No matter what I do, I'm never going to get ahead. The system is rigged against me. And it leads to a sense of disempowerment and all sorts of behaviors that make sense in that scenario. It makes sense that you would just rack up any credit card debt you can get. If you believe that success isn't possible for you, why bother trying? It makes sense that you would take all your money to Vegas and try to win on a roulette wheel. Because, you're not going to win anyway. So if you get some money, spend it. Try to get ahead. So it really does help explain a lot of why people who come from, generations of poverty or disadvantage just don't even try.
Right. Did you have to go through any of that when your dad left?
Yeah,
explain,
in a big way.
I know we've talked about this, but explain kind of what your childhood was, because you experienced both sides of it.
Yeah, we did. So my parents came to this country in the late 70s, and they got into the fabric business and just exponential boom, right, in wealth. I remember as a kid, my dad, everything back then in the 80s was done all cash. Nothing was on credit. And I would remember my dad coming home with a black trash bag full of cash. And he would dump it on the dining table, and my parents would, count it and organize it and get it all. Just the nature of the business and denim fabric back then. Fast forward, I don't know, maybe like 12 or 13, 15 years or so, they got divorced. My dad he took the money. We, at that point, were living in like a 9-bedroom house, huge mansion, had easy life. And my mom, my brother, my sister, and I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment between the 4 of us with no money. And for 5 years, my dad kept my mom in, divorce court, hearing after hearing, you name it. And so we went from rags to riches, back down to rags. And so that, I think, has a profound effect on the psyche. And so even for me, like as a teenager, I very much grew up in the system is rigged kind of mentality because it kind of screwed us over, although it didn't last long for me, in my mindset at least. I think as I finished high school and I started working, I was like, oh, okay, there's a path. There's actually a path. You just got to put forth the effort and you'll be able to overcome the challenges. You're always dealt a hand. Sometimes it's a good hand. Sometimes you draw new cards and it's a better hand or it's worse, but you can keep drawing new cards and you can actually control all the draws. And as you draw more cards, it's up to you to dictate what you're going to do with it. And so thankfully, like my mom, very headstrong. So she was able to navigate us out of that problem as well. But I do think there's a lot of people that go through situations like that probably allow themselves to sit and stew in that poor mentality for a very long time, if not for a lifetime.
So what is the first hack to get out of the cycle? Change your mindset?
Yeah, one of the chapters in the book is titled "Your Beliefs Are Keeping You Poor," and that in and of itself, like if you could just embrace that as a possibility, because when people hear that, they're like, no, it's not that. It's the greedy whatever corporations,
it's all the
rich
corporations.
people. Yeah, it's the government. I mean, pick your poison, right? There's plenty of people to blame things on that totally deserve some blame. That's the other thing. But you will fall prey to a confirmation bias. This is what we call it in psychology, where you believe that, for example, rich people are evil. So by the way, everyone, this mindset, this belief is associated with having terrible financial outcomes. You believe rich people are greedy, money corrupts. It's called money avoidance. Done tons of studies on it, and it will keep you poor. The problem is that there's plenty of examples of rich people who are evil. Now, by the way, there's plenty of examples of broke people who are evil too. But if you have that confirmation bias, you will screen out any sort of evidence to suggest that rich people might be doing good things with their money. And one of my favorite examples is, and I get this trolls in my comments all the time, love the trolls. But anytime you hear that Warren Buffett or Bill Gates is going to donate a bunch of money to charity, I mean, what's the first thing you see on social media? It's like, yeah, well, they're doing it to save money on taxes, and this is someone who doesn't really understand how taxes work. But they find reasons to write it off because in your mind, rich people are greedy. So you screen out data that would challenge it. So I think the most important intervention is to believe that your beliefs around money are keeping you poor. Like if you can just accept that as a reality, that is the start for change, frankly.
How much harder is social media made things like confirmation bias, right? Because the algorithm will push, and it only strengthens that bias, significantly.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, so now you don't even have to screen out disconfirming evidence. It's just all brought to you.
You're not getting fed anything.
You're not being fed it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And I couldn't even stop thinking about like the Bill Gates example. The only thing I would say on that is like, there's a lot of very successful people that have a growth mindset that don't like Bill Gates, but
that's true. That's true.
He might be a bad example.
Well, but it's like, we'll use Warren Buffett. So
Warren Buffett's a better example.
Anytime you hear that some rich person
Elon Musk
is donating money for something or whatever, even the most like selfless possible, I pick that because it's the most selfless thing. Like I'm going to donate 98% of my wealth when I die to charity.
Right.
People will find ways to disparage that and be like, oh, it's for this sneaky thing he's doing. It's like he's going to be dead and he's giving it all to charity. For me, that's clear evidence that he's being generous.
Yeah.
But if you have this belief that rich people are greedy, money corrupts, you can even find ways to discount that.
Yeah. I think you can even go like macro on it. And if you look at the West or even like our capitalist system, which, you get a big group that does not like it because of everything you just talked about, greed and money. Yet America donates more money around the world than anyone in the history of the world. It's like the system creates wealth. Right? Pulls more people out of poverty than anything. So it's interesting though that I've never thought of it that way, that if you have somebody to blame and, greed is the driver behind everyone who's wealthy, then it gives you an excuse to be okay with where you're at.
It really does. And it's so seductive because it might take you years or even decades to climb the socioeconomic ladder, and that's a lot of hard work, but you can get instantaneous relief by disparaging people who have something you wish you had.
Yeah.
Because now you're like, well, at least I'm not one of those. And by the way, this is one of the things that keeps people stuck too, because as you start to make more money, you're going to be distancing yourself from your tribe. And so I'm now going to talk about this like prehistoric psychology we all have that explains most money behavior. So we spent most of our time on Earth in small hunter-gatherer tribes of 100 to 150 closely related people. And your entire psychology is designed to keep you close to those people. And so we see this all the time, entertainers, athletes, sudden money events, people winning the lottery. Within a matter of years, they're right back where they started. And it is because of this tribal mindset. And what happens is you have a deep existential terror inside of you that if you start to get away from your tribe, you're going to die because that's what happened, okay? For example, everyone gets up and runs east in your tribe. You're going to get up and run east because if you just sat there, you got eaten by a tiger, right? And so that explains why people will jump into markets that are screaming hot, jump out at the bottom. I mean, we're just wired to do the wrong thing when it comes to investing. And when you start to make more money than the rest of the people in your tribe, they will sabotage you. They will try to sabotage you, not because they're evil, because they don't want to lose you. Right. So they'll say things like, oh, I bet you think you're better than us now. Or like, hey, you got to share it. There's an expectation in lower income tribes and communities that you share it. It's like, what are you talking about? You don't keep all that for yourself. So even hoarding wealth kind of goes against the tribal mentality. So you have to understand that natural human wiring if you actually want to do well with money, because we're wired to do it all wrong.